Hey everyone, welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Now, normally this broadcast on Fridays, as we talk about the astrology for the upcoming week, is a live broadcast, but as many of you may already know, that there is renovation and the occasional power tool happening just feet away from my recording booth. So live is such an awesome experience, and I do like the interaction. I like truly the transparency and the authenticity of being live in the moment. But it's been quite a week, hasn't it? And let's not mince words here. If you haven't been in some way, shape, or form slapped in the face with something this week, I guess you're, I don't know who you are. Let me know. Or if somebody in your life hasn't been slapped in the face, and has had a ripple effect on your life, because it has been quite the shit show, I'm not going to lie. So you may hear the occasional power tool or banging or anything else, and it's just part of the process of what I'm going through in my physical everyday life. And how this Pluto direct, it really just went right to it. It did not take any time at all to start just tearing down all of the infrastructure. And even if you're aware of the fact that all of this tear down is something that you've put into place and put into motion and have created the space to happen, it still has an actual impact on all of our lives. So, but recording and coming into a position where I have a little bit more control over the environment, right? I can always pause this recording and have a little bit more say over the nature of it because of all these external circumstances. So I appreciate people who are patient with this process. They should be done soon. I can't promise that we will do the Starseed Ministry live next week either, but you just got to work with what you have. And that seems to be one of the major themes that is presenting itself, at least to me, in the past week based on my own experiences. So if you're following Catalyst Energies on social media, either on Telegram or Facebook, I've been posting. I'm doing a lot more writing just because I haven't been able to do any recording or transmitting. So I've been more transparent about my own journey over the past week and how these incredible transits have just been kicking my ass, along with just about everybody else I know. Mars squared Neptune. Like I said, if you didn't get slapped in the face, if there wasn't a freak out, a blow up, nightmares, any number of things that the normal patterns of resistance dissolving away, and as you fall literally into the mirror that you're looking at yourself in, everybody's going through it. And there are two more of these transits coming, one in November, and the final one, as they are both direct, is going to be in April, as we're ending the eclipse cycle that's happening and about to start the next one. So we're going to go primarily today, we're going to look at the astrology for the weekend. We're going to look at our third quarter moon, which is on Monday. The sun is going to be conjunct Arcturus. The moon squaring it will be conjunct Procyon. Oh my gosh. And this full moon has just been something else, and it is still reverberating, but we had no time really to adjust to even that over the course of the week, because we had the sun in a trine to Saturn, we have Mars in a square to Neptune, we have Mercury opposite Jupiter, we have today, or even just last night, Venus in the same position of the sun in a trine to Saturn, and it's just been one thing after another. And my friends, this is really going to find its culmination point, strangely enough, with the Scorpio new moon on the 25th, which is a partial solar eclipse, and eclipse season starts. So there will be information, content, a reading offering for all of that stuff coming up that I will share with you next week. But let's really get into the astrology of this weekend, and certainly looking at that third quarter moon. It's a big starseed activation. There are so many raw feelings right now floating around, and like I said, people are getting slapped in the face left and right. The things I've heard this week have just been, and I've experienced myself. If you're not on social media, just for the sake of, giving an idea of like where we may, all be going through this in our own way. But I was really facing my deep shadow. I'm having really strong natal Pluto, transits right now, natal Pluto activations through a lot of the transiting planets right now. I had the devil literally whispering in my ear, which was something that, there is a lot of elements vying for our attention right now. And in a way, I think that's actually for the sake of our highest good here. And this is why I titled this astrology report, the mind piercing through appearances, because the slap in the face that Mars Neptune really provided, and even the Sun and Venus in a trine to Saturn, which is showing the ways that we have been divergent in an attempt really to establish some sort of equilibrium and balance, even if it's in a way that is actually more of like a means to an end. Boy, those themes are coming out strong, really, really strong. And there's, my neighbor came over this morning, and he's an older gentleman, and, he's been through, a number of physical things recently in the last year or so. And one of the things he said to me as he was talking about the physical things that he'd experienced, and real big changes to his physicality, was the resulting PTSD as a result of it, and going to a counselor and things like that. And he was really transparent. He said, once you get past the surface level, I don't want to go there, right? And in a way that he was being very real and authentic with himself. And also I could tell that he was kind of almost having that process within that moment of just, how do you go deeper when you hit that wall? And in some cases, the Mars square Neptune, what it did was dissolve the appearance of a solid structure, a mirror, right? Some sort of force of resistance. It dissolved it completely. And we found ourselves either walking through that mirror, right? Like that scene in Neverending Story, right? Where Atreyu walks through the mirror as he's looking at himself as Bastion. Or we may have fallen into it and we're spiraling out of control. There's so many ways that this has been unfolding, but really important that not only are we piercing through the appearance or the veneer of things, that we are also willing to continue the journey to where that leads, because that's going to be where we discover who we actually are. And the full moon conjunct Chiron is just bringing out all the ways that we have really betrayed ourselves in the face of social justice, the collective good, trying to keep a balance in a relationship by being the one that does all the legwork, staying on the surface so as not to disrupt our own equilibrium by starting to do a dark night of the soul or a shadow journey. All of these things are very relevant to what has been going on right now, and we have not been given much of a break. And this is something we anticipated, did we not? I mean, I feel like I said in multiple astrology reports leading up to the Mars square Neptune that the people that are reliant on that resistance are going to find themselves shit out of luck. And lo and behold, that is what many of the things that I observed, including myself, experienced. But the good thing is that I also saw a bounce back or a resolution, or the manifestation is happening sooner. So as long as you are willing and open and honest with yourself and forgiving of yourself and willing to see that resistance and how it has led to growth and knowledge and learning, but also how it has kept you from actually really getting into the meat of who you are, because it's so easy to skate across the surface. People that were really genuinely interested and willing to look at themselves without the fear of what they may see. It was like immediate, within like 12 hours, of just like, oh, okay. I see now, and I know what to do, and at least in this moment, how to move forward. So other people, it's just like things are out there to get your attention, and as much as they may bring up things you don't want to look at, just keep in mind that there is no hiding it anymore. And the more people push it away, the more people want to skate across the surface. Every time that Mars and Neptune are coming into a square over the next 6 months, it's going to bring it back up again. So hats off to those of us who are facing our own shadow and realizing that this is the only work. Right? It doesn't, the more we attempt to externalize our connection to source or God and our own divinity, the further away we get. And this is why psychological operations are so successful, and it doesn't matter what belief system you are operating under, there is something there that is going to pull you out of the experience of truth that is inherent and infinite within each of us, okay? And there are lots of ways that we can follow the map, right? And I just happen to use astrology, but there are lots of other ways in which we are able to follow the map back within ourselves, okay? So now that my monologue has finished, I will move on with the astrology. So what I'd like to do as well is just share a couple things before we get into the meat of it and I start really channeling some of this through, because I haven't really had an opportunity to do so in like a week, right? I didn't broadcast on Monday. I haven't really even been doing readings necessarily. It's been a lot of prep. It's been a lot of research. It's been a lot of admin stuff, that kind of thing. And of course, just having so much new and uncontrolled energy in my house as it's going through its own renovation and remodeling. I've spent a lot of time as well just putting my energy towards maintaining whatever equilibrium I can in the face of all the other shit that is just like all over the place. So I really want to give the full space here to go into the astrology once it starts coming through. So in the meantime, what I'm going to share with you first is just in case you are unaware or you've been thinking about it. So the yoga program that I'm offering starts on Monday the 17th, which in fact is our third quarter moon, the third quarter square, and the last lunar cycle, the last quarter of the lunar cycle that began with our Libra new moon right after the equinox. So this is another 21-day program. This is for those of us that are wanting to bring this balance back into our actual bodies, right? We started with the Reiki program, which was the energetic template through the Reiki healing attunements. Now we are working with the tools that are presented through all the movement arts. It doesn't have to be yoga. It can be Qigong. It can be Tai Chi. It can be any form, Aikido, right? Kung Fu, whatever your practice is, right? Capoeira, right? Whatever the practice is, the idea here is that it's conditioning and opening the body to be able to hold, a higher resonance and a higher frequency. So this particular program that I'm offering is, number one, at a sliding scale, which is a steal if you've ever taken a yoga class here in the West, right? And every day will be a progressive piece that is going to build a full vinyasa practice from warm up to shavasana or corpse pose. So it's progressive, it's on your own time, in your own space. I offer modifications and it's open enrollment. So you'll also be able to offer, or I'll be able to offer this to you throughout the whole thing, because you'll have access to every single daily video and everything that it entails as we go up to the end of this point. So that's something you can go to catalystenergies.net. It's on the homepage. It's linked in the description box below, and it takes you to the current offerings, and then you can register and let me know if you're interested. So there's I'm very curious. I can hear the consistent power tools, which is why I'm putting on my headphones. They have nothing to do other than blocking the noise out there so I don't get distracted. So the other thing I want to share here is the other thing I want to share is that today I'll be recording and posting the first session of our next Catalyst Classroom topic, which is for monthly subscribers, and it's all about stellar physics, the electric universe theory, solar weather, how it works, what it is, and we're really starting out here understanding the fundamentals of our star and how the different scientific angles are looking at it. Now, I'll go into all of this when I actually do the presentation. So I just want to let you know again that you can register for this at Subscribestar, but you can go to my website and get the full explanation and get an idea of what you're getting into, and then you can link directly to Subscribestar. It's $5 a month. You are getting content every week, either content like the Catalyst Classroom stuff or access to the Starseed Fellowship live Zoom call. So every other week there is something that is being offered for your $5 a month. Plus, monthly subscribers get discounts on all of the readings and offerings that I put out there. So that's another bonus as well. So that's something that you can look into by going to my website. Again, linked in the description box below. And finally, the lunar transit forecast readings are now open for Taurus and for Scorpio, because this next lunar cycle is a new moon in Scorpio. And of course, if you want the full range of what to expect as a Taurus and Scorpio, you can keep an eye out for the eclipse reading, and I will be putting together promotional material, sending it out to my email list. You want to get on that list, you can go to my website as well, and on the front page it pops up the option to subscribe, and you get all of the promotional material and information that I need to share before I put it out anywhere else. So that's going to be a 90-minute reading for $99, but that's looking at the whole 6 months eclipse cycle. But these are options too if you want to just look at the month ahead for your sign. If you are a Scorpio or Taurus, sun, moon, and rising, this is available for you as well. So anything that I put up here as an offering is going to be on the homepage of my website with options to book from there. And eventually everything is going to be centralized through my website. No more third-party stuff, subscriptions, the content, everything is going to be going through the website eventually. That's the plan. That's the dream, right? So we'll get into the astrology right now. And if there is too much residual noise, I really do apologize, but I can't keep not going on with life. And I think that is a really good thing to consider as well with all of the energy happening right now, is that you got to work with what you have. And it may not be clean. It may not be perfect. You may not have, and things may not have been what they have appeared to be. And I think that might be a very difficult thing for a lot of people right now. I can say for sure that I'm having my own struggles around some of these themes in terms of things not looking as if they appear and needing to pierce through the appearance and get at the essence of things, because a hologram is just light at a certain frequency, and to understand the frequency of it is a lot more gives us a lot more insight into what is, as opposed to the image that we are being presented with. So, we just have to work with what we have. Kind of like these headphones, right? That are wrapped in duct tape right now. Sometimes you just got to work with what you have, and it may not be exactly what you wanted, and you're like, I didn't ask for this, God. Like, why am I in this situation? But I assure you there is a reason, and it's always comes back to how this is influencing our soul's growth, our learning, and our evolution. Again, that's where the real work is the internalized personal experience, and what happens outside of that, or what happens externally. It's not necessarily fully a function of what's going on. It's a relationship. And so there's so much to gather from what we observe about our own internal experience, and so much about how we can understand our outer experience based on our internal processes. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we are looking at today, the 14th. And like I said, the Venus just came off to that trine, like here with Saturn. One of the things that's going to be happening during this next week, and really we're going to look at the next 10 days, because I want to look all the way up to the end of this lunar cycle, which is that Saturn is going to station direct during this time. So these transits that are in trine to Saturn, the Sun and Venus, and truly even Mercury is going to be in a trine to Saturn, like as it's stationing, like in that moment. So these connections to Saturn in its retrograde right now, the internalized crystallization, right? The way that the collective consciousness and the resonance of it, or the full network of the energy that moves through a collective, the template within ourselves, and the crystallized, the authority, the sense of discipline, the sense of determination that Saturn can represent. It's internalized right now, and it is providing that scaffolding within ourselves. Now, some people, and I think probably many of us at times have felt the pressure of that, like how strong it is, like you can't get out of it, right? Like there's nothing that you can do that's really going to allow you to bust loose out of the collective consciousness, because you, in fact, everyone else are a part of it. Our voice is part of that resonance. And so until we acknowledge how we change our own resonance, trying to exit this situation without that awareness has not been working. And everybody's having their own experience of that. I think Aquarius people, could really speak to this right now, because this is what it means to have strong, to be an Aquarius person. If your sun sign, moon sign, rising sign especially, it can really, yes, give your sense of identity and a sense of expression, some sort of structure and authority, but it also can really set you apart from everyone else. You can feel very much like that wall that cannot get pierced in your own identity, your own feelings. But this trine here with Venus, with the sun, absolutely was illuminating, and now with Venus too, right at our resources, right at our relationships, and the balance. You can fool the ego, truly, right? As much as the sun sign we're focusing it on this month in this Catalyst Classroom, it is the primary thing that everybody acknowledges in astrology in terms of my sun sign is this, that, or the other. It still is the ego consciousness, and it is the expression of our own divinity through our passion, our joy, our exhilaration, our playfulness and fun, right? Leo being the ruling sign of the sun, by the way. This is opposite Aquarius right now. It's our heart and the resonance of our heart, but it's very easy to fool the ego if there is pride, if there's conceit, if there is narcissism even. Wow, because the sun and the sign of Leo in particular, being the territory of the sun, very much represents those things, okay? So yes, it's easy to fool the ego, especially if it's prideful or conceited or just totally full of itself. It's Venus that will not be fooled. It's Venus that will not be fooled, especially in Libra, right? She is the balancer of the scales. And so no matter how much that you appeal to her ego, appeal to her sense of comfort and taste, and appeal to her sense of harmony and beauty, the reality is that she has one job in Libra, and that is to establish and hold the space of actual balance between two facets of any situation, right? And there's no fooling her, because she's not using her eyes, right? She's not fooled by the hologram or the appearances. Venus feels the balance, and just like weighing something on an actual scale, there's no way around that. There's no means of convincing yourself. You can try, but then you're just delusional, right? So what the sun represented with this trine that may have been a little foolish, depending, right? Some of us, including myself, right? There is some shit that was illuminated in that situation that just blew my mind. But it's going to be Venus, and I already can tell it's Venus that has brought it to our actual internal feels, right? Our sense of internal equilibrium, something that we, when blind, just like Lady Justice is blind, all you have is your sense of what is materially balanced, what is true symmetry. And I think that's been almost a little harder honestly, I certainly have been feeling a lot of mixed feelings about what I am getting out of that situation. So, and again, the ways that we've been divergent, the ways that we have justified, betraying our own sense of self for the sake of the greater good, the ways that we have, physically, convinced ourselves that being the Robin Hood was okay. And what it's done is created more karmic residue every time we go against our own our own value system and morals, right? Is it totally justified to steal from the rich and give to the poor? Man, this is a conversation that we can have all day, but the Bolsheviks totally used that as a means to come in and overthrow the nobility of Russia. And we all know well, maybe we don't all know. I mean, when I was younger, certainly they were heroes, right? And then you realize that it's just another faction attempting to control and convince people to give all of their sovereignty over to the state, including their resources, right? So, not to get into a philosophical and ideological discussion about the Bolshevik Revolution, but this degree of Libra is a big part of this idea of non-possessiveness and the dark side of it, and the idea of divergence, right? As a means to create balance when you can't, or when you feel like that the social order is unbalanced. So now, how is that related to Saturn? Well, we need to bring everything forward. We need to bring everything, every piece of strength, all of our resources as a society, in order to actually manage the destructive elements that come through a flash of insight, right? So the idea is that it's a forest fire that's being quenched and that's being put out, and that takes all kinds of stuff, water, chemicals, sheer strength, right? And you have to be indomitable. So the other thing too is that we may have to, in fact, pull ourselves in and experience or act on this divergence, or maybe we've done it in the past and it has allowed us to really tap into where that strength and that determination really comes from. These trines to Saturn, the Sun and Venus, are really getting some shit done and really focusing on what needs to be accomplished. But it hasn't come without a little bit of, I don't even want to say sourness. It's just a little bit of bitterness, or just kind of like, oh. And I'm telling you that this eclipse coming up, 2 degrees Scorpio, there's going to be a lot of that, and it's not going to be in the mind. It is going to be in the feels, and that is it's going to be a really interesting and in a lot of ways very difficult and very sad, nostalgic kind of time that is going to stretch out for like 6 weeks. Oh my God. Okay, guys. So that's just kind of the general feel with this connection here. You see that Lilith is conjunct Procyon last night, especially opposite Pluto. So bringing all those issues up again about feeling trapped, or feeling like pushed underground, or feeling as if, the only way to free oneself is to go deeper into who they are, into our sensitivity, into where we truly feel enveloped, and where and who has our back. So but also the necessity to kind of pull in like a turtle in a shell at the face of everything else being destroyed, which is Pluto and Capricorn now moving direct. So these themes continue to come up, and Lilith again will pass over this point in her direct motion and bring it up again. So it's important to consider this too, because this is basically where the third quarter moon is going to be, is at 25 degrees of Cancer. So in fact, the sun will be creating a T-square with Pluto and the quarter moon when it happens. And as you can see, it's only going to be in a matter of days here before the sun actually does square Pluto directly. And so does Venus, right? So there's going to be some challenges, right? Can we maintain our perspective of as transcendent and kind of sailing above all of the bullshit, or and the sun, sure, the sun is going to be, that's going to be, ideal for that, even in the square, and even with that square to Pluto. But the power plays, right? The manipulation that can come as a result of a Sun square Pluto, right? Wanting to feel like empowered, so you take power. You may find yourself not really wanting to deal with what's going on up here, or even just, finding your power within this situation, because Pluto is the transformer, right? And it's not, there's nothing quote unquote comfortable or good about this scenario for anyone. It doesn't matter how beautiful of a butterfly you're going to be. The reality is that the metamorphosis process literally takes you down to goo and reconstitutes you. And what human is ready for that? Hardly any. And that's where Mars and Neptune came in with that square. It was basically just like, hey, everything around you that you've been identifying and acting on in terms of like the resistance is just dissolved, right? It's just you and the woo floating around or thrashing around in some cases, and really having to come to terms with your limitations, but also your dharma, right? All of us. So in the retrograde, it's really clear. In the direct motion, when Neptune stations direct, it's going to be, the fog's going to turn back up again. And Mars, thankfully, they'll still both be retrograde when they are in another square in November, which I think is going to be a little, you're either going to like turn on yourself in a very negative way. We're going to see that, or and really start blaming yourself for the ways that you have been deceived or the ways that you've been pulled into propaganda. But also too, the creative integration that we can start really acting on is going to be very potent at that point. So there'll be more to talk about later down the road. I just find myself getting pulled into November so much, November and December, because of the eclipses, Jupiter station direct, everything's going to start moving direct by the time we get to the solstice, other than Uranus, right? Everything at the top of the chart is going to be moving direct. So much has been happening even since March that has been preparing us and giving us opportunity to be prepared. But it doesn't take away the like, oh shit, of these scenarios. And in fact, if it wasn't for Uranus being like, hoo-hoo, if you expected it unexpected, then it wouldn't be unexpected. I mean, it's like trying to predict where strike of lightning is going to happen before it happens. Like, I'm sure people do, but at the same time, if you knew that, I mean, you would have access to a frame of knowledge that I don't think anybody else really does right now. Anyway. So this weekend, what we're going to see is the sun continuing its transit of Libra, just like Venus. We're going to find Mercury is going to, by the end of the weekend, moving into Monday, is going to move out of its post-retrograde shadow. Oh my God, I have never been so like, get out of the shadow, Mercury. Like, this has been a doozy. I swear to God. And I don't mean that blasphemous either. I'm just like, yes, Lord. Divine Great Spirit, I am fully aware that Mercury is still in its post-retrograde shadow. But soon it's going to be moving out. And those three masters, right, that threefold experience, that visual representation in some ways that the culture or our experience has allowed us to be like, yes, this is what I return to when things hit the fan. Mercury's going to cross over that point and move into calm waters. And I'm very much looking forward to that personally. So the moon's going to be moving through what? Gemini, right? The moon's moving through Gemini today. It's going to be in a square to Neptune. It's going to meet Mars as well. And so these... the thing is, you're feeling into the dichotomy in a way that's more perceptual, that's more intuitive, that's able to see patterns or to intuit dynamics of the mind and communication and learning. Pattern recognition is a big part of the third house in Gemini. So having the moon here, it's like you can subconsciously pick up on patterns that maybe you're not totally aware of consciously what they are, but the moon's here. and it's going to square Neptune just like Mars did, and it's going to meet Mars. And so perhaps this could influence the emotions, the anger, a sense of injustice, right? Some sort of warrior energy, this Amazonian type of energy that's going to come out. But it really is going to serve to actually, in some ways, even allow us to kind of just like look in the mirror and feel ourselves in every interaction that we're in, and that even when we think that it is a strict dichotomy, and the spiritual war is very real, right? Because it's a reflection of what's happening within ourselves, right? The battle that we're all having between our material self and our spiritual self, and how we are learning to transmute instead of fight those battles within ourselves. But it's in the battle itself and the friction that the energy is created to actually catalyze the reaction. So just kind of take it easy and follow follow that intuition. Allow the synchronicities to be present if you are being like, that's interesting, or, oh, I noticed that, like, that's weird. We are really being spoken to in many ways right now, and our attention is very much being needed so that we can in fact like take this step forward, right? That we pierce through the appearances of things. But we also have to acknowledge the appearance of things and how there is an appearance, because there is a wall to reflect it off of. There's a mirror to look at. So that can be maddening. Okay. And like I said, it could easily flare some sort of really rash and instinctive and hasty kind of emotional reaction. Okay. So especially in a square to Neptune as well, because, the thing is, this Neptune touches the moon, and it's just like, oh, the moon is really the same space within us. It's just within us. And so it's not going to have nearly the same impact as it did on Mars. It's just like, there has to be an output for Mars to even have relevance. And the moon's going to be like, haha, fooled you. Like, I am you, Neptune and Pisces. Like, we are the ocean within ourselves. So Neptune, even in a square to the moon in Gemini, I think is going to be less, it's going to be less of a blowout, I feel. I could be wrong, right? But that's just what I'm getting off of this right now. So and then the moon's going to actually move into Cancer, of course, this weekend. And that is where the first thing that's really going to happen is, well, besides that, the moon coming into Cancer is her home territory, and she's going to be very powerful in Cancer. Obviously, she's going to be meeting Black Moon Lilith, which means she will be at her lunar apogee, at the point furthest away. At the same time, she's squaring the sun, conjunct Arcturus, and so it'll be very deep, right? It'll be something that is not really easily able to be accessed towards the surface, right? It's going to be something that's reverberating so much deeper. And the sun conjunct Arcturus is kind of one of those moments of, are we identified with the full picture here? Are we able to, well, I would say, are we really able to pierce through the appearances, right? Perceive the great rhythm of universal life, right? And inviting in this new state of consciousness that is truly a spiritual state. So this sun position, sun at 24 degrees, 18 Libra, is the ability to discover in every experience a transcendent meaning. And yes, that is going to fly in the face of and create a lot of tension with the moon in her home sign of Cancer conjunct Lilith and Procyon, because we're going to be very tapped into the very real feels about, what it means to receive providential assistance, right? But it's in this square in particular, that we're going to find ourselves being open to this spiritual response and using our will and our positive imagination in facing our problems in life. And so, yeah, the identifying with the consciousness itself and the capacity to see the world as and the individual in like interdependence is going to be one thing. The friction with the moon, which is not fully illuminated, is that the response of those spiritual forces may not be fully understood, and in fact may be so powerfully deep and primal that we may not even understand why something is even happening. But again, it's about using our will and our positive imagination to face our problems. And the obligation to a reality that we're part of is what this moon position is all about, right? We can't go back and change the situation that we're in, right? Just like in Procyon, the idea is those beings are in a situation that they have to deal with now, right? And so they could just give up, they could just give in, but they didn't. They went deeper. And in the process of that, they became incredibly attuned to the resonance of something more than that which was, the trap around their planet and their system. And so capacities of leadership as a revelation of stewardship is a big part of this moon as well, is that, just because like I said, just because we want things to go a certain way, we had a vision of why we were doing things. This Venus and Sun trine Saturn has really, I think, in many ways, showed us how means to an end or divergent behavior, it may allow for a establishing of equilibrium, but in the end, we have to be very clear with where we actually are and what we're going to do about it. And I think that rings very true to a lot of people that have been down the rabbit hole and back over the last couple of years and realizing like, okay, what am I doing, right? What am I doing in my everyday life to bring about the world and what I envision and what we envision for humanity and what we're actually capable of. So very intense. And this is on Saturday. This is going to be at the third quarter moon on Monday. So if we're looking at Saturday, the 15th, one of the things we're going to see here is that Lilith and Neptune will be in a trine. So same basic area where it's coming out of its conjunction with Procyon. But again, where's our dharma? How are we working together? And really establishing the interdependent relationship between the facets of our mind, our body, and our spirit. And I think that there is something very strongly emotional here that's going to present itself in this water trine that is going to give us some strength, or at least allow us to anchor into a position where we do have some agency over how we feel and how we utilize the power at our disposal, which is, again, a big part of how we fulfill our dharma and are realistic about what our purpose actually is. Because it's very easy to get caught up in the fantasy. And boy, when Neptune stations direct, that fog machine is going to roll in. It's going to be a whole new level of like, oh shit. But the good thing about the retrograde is that the fog is cleared. And we have been looking at these and experiencing these areas of transcendence and unity consciousness and compassion in a way that is clear and easily, I wouldn't say easily accessible, but the fog is not making it difficult to see. But also when the light is reflecting off the sun, it can be blinding. And so people have closed their eyes or submerged themselves out of a necessity to not see what's going on. So, but for those of us who are consciously able to identify what we're doing here, this transit's going to be really important. And then let's see what else is big here for the weekend, my friends. So the big thing is that the moon will come into Cancer, and right after that, it's going to square Jupiter. So again, Jupiter is, talk about the mirror, right? There's nothing like the comedian that reveals the human experience, right? Nothing like the art of comedy that puts that mirror up for all of us to see, but disarms all of the ego about it through laughter and humor. But in its retrograde, I mean, we're kind of getting that experience within ourselves, but I don't think a lot of us have gotten the joke yet, and or just don't like the comedy, right? That happens a lot too. And the square to a moon in Cancer that's like, you know what, I'm just going to ride that magic carpet and just emotionally hover above all of these things. You know, the moon in Cancer is pretty powerful, and we may find ourselves very tempted to, you know, fly on that magic carpet in our own feels and in our own inner core self, just as a means to be able to really see the big picture, because Jupiter in its retrograde, it's not expanding, right? It's not larger than life. It is a contraction of who we are and the meaning of why we're here. And so that square is just going to put that right to the test, and you may find yourself, it may be really difficult in some ways to do this for more than, you know, it may be necessary. It may feel like the best thing to do. This is Friday moving into the afternoon, into the evening, where these two will be in a square with each other. So that might be a moment of escapism that is part of being able to be fully anchored into something, is the also the ability to kind of be in those upper chakras as well, and in a way that we feel it energetically and emotionally. But it's not, it feels like a potential that Jupiter can just bring us right back down onto the ground, which is what we don't emotionally want. So I think this is going to be, and this is a cardinal square, right? Cardinal energy. So there's momentum from both sides that are going to be at cross purposes with each other. And that's going to be pretty fun tomorrow, isn't it? So that's the real big thing for Saturday, is just the moon finishing its transit of Gemini, coming into Cancer, and you see that Lilith and the Sun are now coming into their square as well, which means Lilith and Venus are going to come into a square as well, and this is again Procyon and Spica and Arcturus, and seeing and identifying and applying your knowledge of balance to be able to really see the big picture and to know the big picture is really going to challenge that deep primal sense of protection, of consolidation of power, of, you know, tightening the straps, so to speak, right? Going back into your shell as a means to protect yourself and protect what is vulnerable within you. And Lilith, if we are not listening to that part of ourselves, she's still going to do it. And so you may find yourself, again, there just seems like so much energy of people like, I just want to fold in. I just want to like put, you know, just do the turtle shell thing. Or I want to emotionally hover through escapism around all of this. And again, there's this sense of social responsibility with the moon and Venus in Libra, a sense of equilibrium, a sense of the pattern of the rhythm of the universe, how it always comes back around, and you can't really keep yourself hidden away forever, because there is a responsibility to society that this third quarter moon is going to bring out really, really strongly. So it's not about just holding ourselves in and protecting ourselves and waiting for the shitstorm to pass. We have to be responsible to how we are part of this and what we are going to do about it. And Saturn has been pretty ruthless about that, right? This is what it is. And this is the template that is forming within all of us right now. And we want to be very clear with how we are going to resonate with that. And that's going to be something when the moon comes into Leo next week, I think is going to be very, very telling. So when we come into Sunday, the 16th, the moon is, oh boy, so many interesting connections here on the 16th. Number one, the sun at 23 to 24 Libra, right, coming into conjunction directly with Arcturus, is the ability to develop new modes of response to basic life situations. So there is a light here at the end of the tunnel, and a special aspect that is going to be shown. And it has a lot to do with our heart. It has a lot to do with the left side of the body, which is the feminine side of the body, which is the right brain, which is where all the holistic aspects of our mental processes occur, and the heart, right? The left side is where your heart is, unless you have God, what is the name of that? There's an actual syndrome where you people are born with the heart on the other side of the body. It's there's a name for it, and I knew someone at one point in my life that did have that, and it is not an easy thing to live with. My understanding is a lot of pain and discomfort with something like that. So anyway, it's the left side of the body that I feel like is going to be, and the same thing with Venus when she finally comes into conjunction with this 23 to 24. It's like a butterfly with an extra wing on the left, right? An extra capacity. So something is coming from this that we can identify with, we can be sustained by, that we can really express ourselves through. And again, you're going to feel this square to Lilith, and certainly as things come around, Mercury is going to be in a square to the Cancer moon as well, still in its post-retrograde shadow, just for one more day, really. And you remember that new moon back in the summer after the June solstice, right? The new moon in Cancer, it was at 7 to 8 degrees of Cancer. It's going to be in a square to Mercury that is, our mind having something to return to, some sort of inner source of vitality, right? That blazing fireplace in the deserted home is going to be something that draws our mind to it, whereas the moon's like, hey, you remember back in the summer in June where you set intentions for that new moon here to act and imitate that which you want to grow into, that again is going to come back up, and we can't shirk that very real experience and what we set in motion then through the new moon at the solstice, right? I think that's going to, and that doesn't mean that there isn't something that we can mentally, give our awareness to that is going to give us some hope, right? And give us, but I think what this really brings up is some measure of mental realization and an application of knowledge of balance with the universe, the balance between you and divine source or God, and that there is something to return to when you're about to give up, right? This may be one of those, man, I did nothing, right? I set those intentions and I haven't even remotely started growing into the person that I want to be. And that can, I think, really, oh boy, I feel like that can be very discouraging. And this is where people start to really drop off because they're not seeing the results. And I think this transit is going to bring that out big time with the moon in a square to Mercury. But never fear. Again, if you are, just know that it's going to exit that retrograde shadow by the end of the weekend, and that Mercury will be in calm waters. And so to, again, take this with some grace and a sense of trust in the divine plan, even if you're feeling kind of like shitty about yourself, because I think that that's something that could really come up strongly. And to be easy on yourself, to be forgiving, to have some humor about yourself, to realize that it's not always about you either, and that the things that you experience, and I say you because I mean we, that we experience as challenges or disappointments are all opportunities to learn and grow, okay? And even if this has not come to fruition and we become very sensitive to that and where our power is lacking or where we have been successful, we also don't want to forget where we can return to in our own minds to find a sense of revitalization or just a sense of communion, right? That's a pretty strong read that I'm getting off of this Mercury square the moon. So Sunday, what else is happening? I mean, this is also, by the time we get to the end of Sunday, is really when Mercury starts leaving its shadow. And so the other thing that's really strong is that the moon is going to then come into it's going to come into a trine. It's going to aspect her own nodes. So it's going to come into a trine specifically with K2 or the south node, as you can see. And at the very same time, the moon in Cancer conjunct Sirius is going to be in a square to Chiron, which is conjunct Andromeda. So without getting too much into unpacking why these things are square to each other, and there's a very distinct reason why, because these are beings that operate at different densities of each other, okay? And the Sirians have a sense of responsibility to life in general, and well, it depends on where you're from in Sirius. That's something I can't get into right now. We're already cruising along here at 55 minutes. So, but know that the Sirian starseed activation with the moon in a trine the south node, right? That 120-degree angle with the south node, and also in a square to Chiron, and in a sextile, right? In a sextile, and Mars in a trine, you can see here, to the sun, right? Mars is in a trine to the sun as well. So let's unpack this just a little bit. So where shall we start? Well, the moon conjunct Sirius in a trine to K2. And it's as if those new lines, those connections, right? Establishing new connections of communication, of communion, of just connection and attachment in general, from where we have been at a soul level, what we've mastered, what is the tail of our dragon here, is in a really strong water trine here with the moon conjunct Sirius, which at 13 to 14 degrees, I mean, we are truly facing the vast unknown. The real power is to find your root with the timeless and infinite. That, when you can find that, then you are a circuitry, aren't you? Right? You become the toroidal field that is self-perpetuating. So the Sirian starseeds are often the sorcerers, the shamans, the wizards, right? Not to get too into that nomenclature. The idea here is that these individuals have a connection to the very source of life as the feminine part of the divine. And when there's no limit, then when there's no bottom, there's no limit either. And then you become a self-generating toroidal field. So this is how you're able to practice these modalities, especially as a shaman, right? Because you have to be connected to something more than just the surface level. Otherwise, you are so easily corruptible, and you can't do the work for people if you are just connected to the surface level. So there's a strong connection to this capacity to create new lines of connection and communication that comes from, we're not talking about, this is soul work. We're talking about the nodes of the moon. This is not necessarily anything that has to do with, let's just say this is something that's way, way deeper at a soul level for all of us right now. And the moon representing our internal landscape and our emotional landscape, and really the woo within us is tapped into the infinite, and that is able to lead us, right? It's the sextile to the north node, or Rahu, is where the action is happening from Sirius to Rahu, which is really about emerging, right? We're emerging out of the unconscious. We are emerging as beings out of the ocean, but we're still very close by, because that is where we still find our sense of revitalization, right? So it's like little kids playing on the beach near where the water is hitting the sand. You're not far away. And this is where we're being pulled right now in order to evolve, in order to learn and grow. And those who are stuck here in using their power tools, their power plays, and I don't mean that literally. I mean, their practices of Scorpio, the intensity of gaining power from the connection with others. If you can't get into where that's taking us into a brand new resonance entirely, you see how there's some real potential for some dark shit to be happening here. So, but it's short-lived, because it's really meant to go somewhere brand new and not to stay in the past. So if you're still hanging on to the tail of the dragon and not riding it like you should be, then people are really going to be they're realize that they're not going to turn this ship around and go back towards this. That's not happening. So very potent transit here on Sunday as well. Now, square to Chiron, right? Chiron, it's got the coiled serpent, right, between the two poles of ourselves, and how all kinds of stuff, feeling guilty about it, not trusting that we can actually ritualize our own polarity within ourselves in order to identify who we are, maybe doing this for other people as a shaman would, but never really doing it for ourselves. Boy, if you are in these roles and you have not had your own dark night, you're gonna. And I can... I mean, I feel like we all are going through this initiation right now, and this square to the moon and Chiron in Aries is a big part of this as well. So Sundays, it's like Saturday is going to be like, okay, kind of finishing up the moon in Gemini, tapping intuitively into these patterns, how to use this. Maybe things get a little flared emotionally when it meets Mars, and then comes into Cancer, and it's like, oh, I'm feeling emotionally powerful, I'm feeling good, and then bam, like the square to Chiron, right? The fact that it's aspecting the nodes. And then you have Mars, right? Mars that comes into, or the sun coming into a trine with Mars basically at the degree that the third quarter moon is going to square the sun. And so what are we looking at? We're looking at 24 to 25 degrees of Libra, which again is conjunct Spica and Arcturus directly. And this is, where Orion, or where Mars is all Orion as well. So you have the dichotomy or the resistance of polarity in and of itself, that the Orions know how and identify their real power coming from this. And then you have the Arcturians, which are like completely different density, barely, I don't even think they're really physical beings, right? And they are acting as the key holders, right? The key masters and the gatekeepers in some ways of how we find equilibrium in the universe through the experience of integrating polarity. So the trine here is actually going to be amazing, but it will be pruning away the shit. It really will. And Mars, at least Mars has the capacity to be like, well, let's get to it, right? Let's just start pruning and pruning and pruning. Just be careful. This is a trine, right? It doesn't mean it's good. It just means it is supporting this energy. It is like a foundation. So sometimes when I was working like when I was working as a grower and in the garden, and you're pruning, like hundreds of plants, and you really start getting into like a zone, you could find yourself getting either hyperfixated on like perfect shape, or you could find yourself pruning too much because you're like, prune. Oh shit, I like cut so much off here. That's what Mars is going to do, right? It's going to want to cut back and cut back and cut back, because it's like, oh, I see the big picture, right? I get that, I see the whole thing. So there's a lot of really good potential here, but just be aware how easily you can just carry it away with this, and then all of a sudden you've cut so much back that you actually start to do damage. I don't sense that's going to be out of a sense of like people who are not, if you have a really strongly negative connection to this somehow, right? If you have a really big challenge in your chart related to this, or you are completely stuck in the south node and haven't seen the journey here to the north node, right? And we know who these players really are, but that doesn't mean that we all each don't have this work to do. So also be aware that this is really important to prune and trim back everything that needs to be controlled, right? This expansion of ideas out into the ether that is going nowhere. Mars is going to be like, you know what? It's time to cut this shit off, right? Because I see the whole picture. I am identified with the whole picture and the fact that it is one big cycle. So cutting things back is not going to kill everything that I've been working towards. In fact, it's really meant to enhance the entire experience. And part of the pruning is cutting through the appearances, right? That's something that is, because the plant is still doing exactly what it needs to do. Just because you cut some branches off doesn't mean that it's not doing everything it needs to do under the surface, in the soil, through photosynthesis, right? You don't see everything, but you know that this is part of the process. So that's really strong as well. And then right after that, on the 17th, right, we see that we're going to have that third quarter moon. So the moon is already past Lilith, and then it comes into a square with the sun. So that's going to be Monday when we come into our third quarter. So our fourth quarter, the last quarter of our lunar cycle. So let's look at some of the major themes leading up to really the eclipse on the 25th. I think it's really important to consider just the shit show we're about to walk into. So let me open it up here. Yeah. Willful man. A willful man is overshadowed by a descent of superior power, our destiny, right? And I think that's going to be very difficult emotionally for some people to really wrap themselves around when just because you are aware of the big picture and you can pierce through the appearances and the hologram of it all, that doesn't take away from the feeling of where your place in all of this is and how you participated in bringing it here. Your destiny means that you are creating a space within yourself for God to work through you. And it's very easy with the sun in Libra, especially in the late degrees of Libra, conjunct Arcturus, to be like, well, I have it all figured out, right? It's my personality that is able to establish equilibrium. And the moon's going to be like, whatever you say. I'm going to come in, the high priestess is coming in and be like, I think that your feminine needs to be brought forward as well. And it will happen. And all next week leading up to the eclipse, we have all next week to really deal with the crisis in consciousness that a third quarter moon represents. How are we going to adjust to this type of crisis being presented to us? So let's see here. I want to look at the main theme. So we saw that the sun is in a trine to Mars, and then Venus is in a trine to Mars on Tuesday, the 18th, as we see here. So we'll go into this next day. It's always good to look at the actual, visual, because I get a lot out of looking at the visual representation of the charts, as do many astrologers, because it's the actual shape of things that really communicates a resonance that maybe you can't articulate, but that's the great thing about astrology. So the 18th, we have Venus that's going to be in a trine to Mars in the same location as the sun, conjunct Arcturus. So again, Venus, you can't fool her, right? The sun, you can definitely appease the ego when you're talking about your sun or transiting sun, but it's Venus in Libra that you are not fooling. And it's best to take as full advantage of this as you can right now, because when she goes into Scorpio, she's at her detriment, and she is not like she is. She is not this graceful, intelligent, perceptive, and very balanced, right? And just approach. She is all about symmetry and harmony. When she gets into Scorpio, she also starts struggling because she is at her detriment and she is sinking into the swamp. And that can be very difficult. So if you got Venus in Scorpio like I do, you know all about this place. Okay. Let me find, here we go. So Wednesday is when the moon moves into Leo, and this is where I think we're going to start seeing that opposition here. As you can see, it's going to have the opposition with Saturn, of course. There we go. Opposition with Saturn. Mercury and Chiron are going to start in opposition. And in fact, you can see that not only is it in opposition to Saturn, but Uranus is creating a T-square with the moon in Leo and Saturn in Aquarius. And let's see what that degree is. N is also going to be in a T-square to her own nodes. She's going to be in a trine to Chiron during this time as well. If you go back a couple hours, you will see that trine to Chiron as well. And boy, I mean, really yearning for some sort of self-actualization, which, you know, again, could trigger some sort of release of potential, possibly before it's time. And I say that because the moon at the very same time is going to be in a T-square, just like this figure, right? T-square. It's more like a isosceles triangle in some angles. But the moon's going to be in a T-square with her own nodal axis. And so what you'll also find is it's pretty wide, but it's actually a grand square. And so the yearning for self-actualizations from an internal and emotional position, yes, I think it may trigger some sort of activation, some sort of potency activation, some sort of activation or desire, right? It may be jumping the gun. It may be coming out of a sense of victimhood or needing to be a savior. Ooh, especially if you're an Aquarius person, because Leo's opposite your sign. So you may find yourself like, you know, trying to come in and be a savior in your relationships. And it's going to be that T-square to the nodes. And even this and then the T-square with Uranus as well and Saturn that is going to put a stop to that. Oh my gosh. Right, that we're going to try to alchemize ourselves emotionally, and maybe our little houseboat party again is going to be disrupted by reality. And that's not to say that we shouldn't allow ourselves to tap into these Leo energies and to acknowledge the yearning for self-actualization. And in fact, the best case scenario for this moon in a trine to Chiron is that yearning actually allows for a healing moment, right? That we want to come out of that sense of victimhood or those really tender wounds. We want to come out of it new, right? I think that's a best case scenario, but you have to be very mindful of what's being triggered within you when we're talking about Chiron. So, but yeah, the houseboat party opposite Saturn, the T-square with Uranus right now, and I think that we are going to very much be tested. But what I'd say here is when you have a T-square and you have the point of the T-square, which is where Uranus is, this is about the new we've moved into a new degree actually. So this is like airing out an old bag, like cleansing your own consciousness, purifying your field. Quite literally. And that may put some things in a position where we're like, I don't like this at all. Like, I want to be out on my houseboat. I don't want to be putting out this forest fire. But to keep in mind that the Uranian shit show for all of the ways that it turns everything upside down and capsizes our boat, realize that this is a purifying our field, purifying our resources, purifying our material assets, and the natural, restoring or giving us an opportunity to restore some sort of natural harmony in this situation, right? So there's also, the sun is also going to square Pluto this day, and Mercury is going to be opposite Chiron. So this is where being able to, how do I say this? This is where being able to maybe, find that noon siesta when it gets too hot, you know what I mean? Take a break. You don't want your brain to overload during this, even though that really potent energy with Chiron and Aries like that is really like wanting to pop off and really wanting to, that Kundalini is going to want to wake up, right? And why is it being activated? Is it for you to really come out of that painful wound and see yourself anew? Or is it out of a way to bypass that and try to do the Chiron things, right? Which is tap into all of your superpowers, but really just to assist everyone else and leave yourself at the wayside, which is not an option anymore with Chiron and Aries. So Mercury and Libra here is just like, just take a rest, right? There's a reason that you take a nap in the middle of the day is because you need time to digest. And Chiron's going to be like, no, you don't have time. You need to get to work, right? You need to actually do something. You need to change yourself, right? You're not good enough as you are, or you have really fucked this up. And it's better get that energy going again. And Mercury, I'm telling it's out of its shadow now. It's in new territory. So it's going to seem weird, but seriously, learn to rest and let it digest, right? Because otherwise, what's the point? You're just running yourself in circles. So, and then, like I said, the sun in a square to Pluto, right? As the economy completely collapses, as our institutions are like just burned to the ground, right? As our all sense of security in this reality is just put through the ringer and the destruction process of Pluto. The sun in a square, again, conjunct Arcturus, now opposite Andromeda Galaxy, is like an airplane high in the sky, right? It's going to seem like you're not dealing with things, but I'm also willing to bet here that this perspective is giving a transcendent realization that's going to be really necessary as the tower is falling in this square. It's just going to be very difficult to maintain because one is the mind and the other is the materium itself. And again, cardinal energy, right? There's momentum here. And Venus right after it is going to do the same thing. So that's on the 19th, right? And then and the 20th is Thursday. Venus comes into the square with Pluto. Friday, the 21st, the moon is in Virgo, and the 22nd as well. And it's all really mostly Virgo moon transits until the 22nd is when Venus and the sun come into a conjunction at 30 degrees of Libra. This is a big deal. This is a very big deal. You're coming at the last degree of Libra into Scorpio. I'm so stoked that it's actually in Libra still, because when these two come into Scorpio, especially Venus, it's not going to be easy. People are really going to sink into this abyss in their resources, in their fields, in their sense of harmony and beauty, their relationships, their projects, all of the things that have real value to us. It's going to be very difficult not to start sinking under the pressure in some ways and getting into the abyss essentially. So I'm really stoked that this conjunction is at the last degrees of Libra, where we have full philosophical awareness of an entire situation. Not only that we're identified with, but a sense of valuing ourselves and valuing everything we have learned and come to experience that has brought us to this holistic experience of knowledge and balance and equilibrium, because we're really going to need it. We're really, really going to need it during Scorpio season, and certainly a Scorpio solar eclipse, which, by the way, the path of totality, even though it's a partial solar eclipse, is right through Russia and Eastern Europe. So just be ready for something along those lines. And by the way, it's on Vladimir Putin's ascendant at 3 to 4 degrees Scorpio. So just, it's there. It's happening. And then the same day on the 22nd, Saturn stations, right? Mercury comes into a trine with Saturn, just like the sun and Venus did. And then the moon moves into Libra, and the sun and Venus move into Scorpio. The moon moves through Libra in its balsamic phase. And then on the 25th is when we get, our partial solar eclipse in Scorpio. So there'll be so much more to talk about when we get to that point, obviously. And you can see we got Venus, we got the sun, we got the moon, and right past that is the south node. So October into November, right, we're going to have all of this line up with the south node, and especially because the lunar eclipse will be conjunct almost directly the south node itself. And that means the full moon will be conjunct Uranus. So that's midterm elections here in the United States on November 8th. So we've been waiting for this time for a while now. So it's getting very real. And the best advice I can give at this point, other than looking at your own chart and be like, okay, these are other things, is to you really embrace that slap in the face as your guidance team and your own higher self and your whole soul's progression getting your attention about something, right? Because something that needs to be course corrected, something that really needs to be put to bed finally, right? So you're not carrying that residue into the next cycle. And when the nostalgia of what's been broken with this partial solar eclipse is so present that you don't find yourself like, it's going to linger anyway. Let's put it that way. But if you're aware of that and realize that even the soul needs its time to digest and to go into its own underworld in order to transmute and to alchemize, I think it'll make it a little bit easier. If you're still on the surface about things, the lingering effects of what has been broken with this eclipse is going to be very painful. And just wait till we get to the lunar eclipse on the midterm elections. It's going to be such a shock, right? The moon conjunct Uranus, right? Talk about cleansing the doors or cleansing your own mind. It's like the collective's field, physical field, and everything that goes along with it is, going to experience like this underlying shakeup with the election, which we've known for a long time. But the fact that it's on the eclipse is pretty telling. So I think that's all I have to share with you guys right now. In terms of this astrology report. So thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. If you're interested in any of the things I talked about or showed you at the beginning here of this report, you can go to my website. Everything you need truly is there, and eventually all of it's going to be there. So it's always a good thing to familiarize yourself with that landing pad, and certainly getting on my email list so that I can stay in touch with y'all directly as everything becomes, like I said, streamlined and centralized into one location. Right now, a lot of things are spread out over multiple social media platforms and Subscribestar and YouTube and blah, blah, blah. And I'm really just kind of sick of it. I want it all to be centralized. So that's where I'm moving eventually. So you can get ahead of the curve by being familiar with the website and getting on my mailing list so you know what's up. And I love you guys. Have a good weekend. Take very good care of yourselves. Please reach out if you're interested in a reading or if you have any questions, right? Or if you have questions about the Catalyst Classroom. I think I'm going to be posting, once I record it and post it for the subscribers, I'm going to create a little preview about what it's all about, so you can see like the level and caliber of content you're actually getting for your subscription, because I do put a lot of time into creating these presentations. And so anybody that is already part of the Catalyst Classroom, feel free to comment here with your experience if you feel like it'll be valuable to bringing other people into the community, because there's a lot that you get for what I think is a very reasonable monthly subscription. And I take it very seriously, the investment you're making, not only in me, but in yourself. So we're all here together and we're all getting through this together. I love you guys. Have a great weekend. Take care of yourself. Like I said, take care of each other the best you can. And you can't really take care of other people until you've taken care of yourself truly. So, get out of that Chiron mode, and there'll be lots of opportunities over the weekend to do that. So, and I'll hopefully see you guys on Monday. We'll see how things go. I might just have to record the ministry as well or skip it again. It just depends on how this went and how distracting it may have been for you. So in the meantime, I love you guys. See you later. Bye.